Okay. The recording is in progress and welcome everybody. Wonderful to meet you all over here. We've been planning this webinar for a really long time because we find that a lot of students are applying for many academic areas like, computer science or economics and so on. And there is so much knowledge in the environment about it. Parents know stuff about it. Your seniors know stuff about it, right? People can tell you and share a lot of information about which college is good. What do you do after that? What type of jobs are available? But when you look at some of the more professional hands-on areas, if you look at areas like medicine, if you look at an area like law or an area like design, which are not necessarily the regular academic areas where you do a major, then perhaps you're looking at doing an MBA or you're looking at doing a postgrad. But in this case, you're looking to do your graduation and then start working. There is a very clear professional pathway for you. How does that work for someone applying for colleges abroad? So that was the whole idea of this webinar. And after a long time, we've got this together and we've got a fantastic list of speakers in each of the areas. So here we go. Before we start, just a little view of what we do in this little film. And then we start off. We first go with the design speakers, then we look at law, and then we look at medicine, sorry, and finally we look at law. So here we are. This is just an overview of iKnowMe's approach to finding your own path. Just give me a moment, please. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Romy, just see a couple of people have just messaged on a couple of groups saying that the link is not working. So if you can just send the link again to them. So, okay, here we are all set to start and we are starting with the design, with art, design and architecture. I'm calling it design, but we have really got a variety of speakers across different creative areas. And Kritika, our lead counselor who works with students who are applying for a lot of these creative areas, will be leading the discussion here. So enjoy, everybody. Over to you, Kritika.
Okay, hi. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out to join us today. So let me sort of just dive right into it, right? So I would like to ask the students first, which is Aditi, Dev, and Anushree, that how did you guys prepare your portfolio for your design school applications? Any that?
So should I go first?
From
Before they do that, Kritika, I'd request you to just introduce them for the sake of our audience, saying, who they are, where they are studying, so people know what to expect.
Right. So Aditi is joining us from SVA in New York. Dave is joining us from Emily Carr, Canada. Anushree is joining us from UAL London, which is University of the Arts London. Parul is an alumni of Columbia University, and Shalina today is our portfolio coach school admissions expert who's joining today, right? So let's begin with Aditi. So if you can tell us that how to prepare your portfolio and how did you go through the process?
Okay, first of all, thanks for the opportunity. Second, portfolio preparation is pretty heavily major dependent in most schools, especially when it comes to art. There are a few schools that have a foundation year where you don't, have to choose your major from the get-go. But in most schools, what you have to do is prepare your portfolio while keeping your major in mind. And in your
Your
portfolio,
major,
there's, come again, sorry.
and your major is?
Oh, I'm presently majoring in comics at SVA, and
Okay,
I'm also in the school's honors program, which
okay,
is
perfect.
like, along with art classes, I also do some literature, science, and humanities related classes as well.
No, that is wonderful. Majoring in comics, I think that's a very, very unusual major, and everyone would be very interested in knowing about that.
All right. So when it comes to how I prepared my portfolio specifically, SVA is one of the few schools that actually does have a foundation year for every major other than animation. So what I tried to do was showcase the broadest variety of the skills and techniques that I know. And I also tried to focus on including many different mediums. So each piece in my portfolio, though not everyone has to do this, but this is just something that I did. Each piece in my portfolio was made using a completely different medium. So you had something like 18 to 20 different mediums showcased over there. And that is something that schools really like. They like to see the diversity of what you can offer.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Aditi. And Anushree, I know you are studying at UAL. If you could also introduce yourself and what you're studying and tell us how did you go about choosing your pieces for your portfolio?
Hi, so thank you. And my name is Anushri. I'm studying at Central St. Martin. And I am a product and industrial design student. So we have like our own methodology of like going about it. And I actually also did a foundation year. So while I was applying for the foundation year, again, like even my portfolio was rather like broad, but as I narrowed down into getting into CSM for product and industrial design, it became more about like trial and error. I think one advice I'd give everyone is to make sure that they're showing the entire process and really showing that they have considered every possibility that could be taken, especially in like product design. Again, yes, like medium exploration is very important even in product design, and I would recommend like making as many models as possible and using things such as cardboard, like foam, clay, as many as you can basically, and also having like a strong like research foundation, having a lot of like backing and a lot of people actually using your product before you show it, and really think about it from a manufacturing perspective if you're applying directly to product and industrial design, and show your uniqueness, like they will appreciate it. So just be confident with your work. Yeah, that'd be my advice.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Anushree. And Dave, if I can ask you to first tell us what you're studying and also how did you go about choosing your portfolio pieces?
I'm studying graphic design at MDCA. So at MDCA, we have a foundation year, but it's specified to your specialization. So I did a foundation year only in design. But when I was applying from home to go to school, the best thing was not only to show design work in my portfolio, but also to show work from other forms of art. So in my application, I had a couple of models that I had made and a few paintings. And another thing is to also make the art express yourself and your views, not only just a nice painting. So they have a feeling for everything you can do.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Dave. And Parul, if I could ask you as well, that when you were applying to Columbia, what was the process like in terms of the portfolio and what did you need to showcase?
Parul?
Oh, I think you're on mute, Parul. Okay, that's all right. We can come back to Parul. All right. So again, for Aditi, I wanted to ask you that when you were what were the factors that were important for you when you were choosing your design school?
So some of the important factors, as well as some of the major reasons why I chose SVA specifically, are first of all the majors that the school offered. Everywhere other than SVA, I actually applied, I think almost everywhere barring one school, I applied as an animation major. But SVA was the only school on my list that offered comics. And I really wanted to get into comics because it was kind of my childhood dream to be a comic artist. And, over the years, I didn't really think that any school would offer that, but then I found that, SVA offers it. So I decided to choose, one of the big reasons I chose SVA was the major. Another reason that I considered was the location. And initially, this didn't matter to me, but what happened is that I actually visited a bunch of different schools in the US. I visited SVA, which is located in New York City, and I realized that I really like the location. Since I've pretty much grown up in a city environment my entire life, there was, um, how do I say it? I feel very comfortable there. And I also like the kind of opportunities that were available for me. The number of artists who already live there is pretty massive. So, there's gallery exhibitions and events all the time that I go to pretty much weekly. Other than that, the extracurricular kind of opportunities offered at the school, or the things that I could do outside of my major, like the honors program isn't extracurricular, but the one that I mentioned earlier, it's a separate program from my major, which is comics. And seeing that SVA offered these opportunities for students who are interested in academics along with art was very interesting to me. So it kind of pushed me to, go there.
And
Yeah.
did you find it hard in New York, considering it's not a big campus school and things like that? Did you find it hard to adjust to New York?
So New York itself, honestly, I quite like it. It wasn't especially hard to adjust to. It's just an expensive city, that's all. I think moving abroad can be, how do I say this? New York itself was fine, but I think the whole process of moving abroad and away from home, for me, it's the first time. So that was a little overwhelming to start with. But I think after a year, I'm kind of settled down.
Got it. Thanks. And since we're on New York, I think Parul is back on. So hi again. Okay, so
Hi.
Parul, a master. I guess you can introduce what you studied at Columbia, and you can tell us about it as well.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. So I'm Parul Sharma. I did my master's MS in architecture and urban design from Columbia University. This was quite a long time ago, though. I graduated in 2015, and I also worked in the US following that. So I guess in terms of the requirements, it's a little different, I think, from other maybe MFA programs and other design programs. Portfolio is very important, but obviously also your statement of purpose, your work experience, all of that. I didn't do my undergrad there. I did my master's, so it'll be slightly different because at that point you do still have a little bit of work experience. But I think like some of the other people before me mentioned, it's really important to have a unified story that is clear in your SOP as well as your portfolio. And as a designer, architect, whatever, you have a lot of additional skills at your disposal. So your CV, like your portfolio, they're all expressions of your design thinking, the way you organize information, right? So your portfolio should represent a diverse variety of content, but if you don't have that, that's okay. It doesn't have to be stuff that has been executed in real life. It can be conceptual projects. It can be even your extracurricular stuff could play an important role in the sense that I don't know if you've done any, relief work, disaster relief work, if you've constructed shelters, or if you've done some sort of community engagement work, or anything in the arts, or anything that is any kind of skill. But how you interpret that is, I think, the skill that maybe I Know Me or anybody else could help with. It's not about dumping all your whole life story, right? It's about how you can edit and curate something that ties in with the program that you're trying to apply with. So for me, I did have college work. I had some professional work. I had, so I had interior architecture. I had office, retail, urban design, sort of level conceptual planning for a competition where I worked in a firm with. And one of my favorite projects was a project that was a very on-ground project to reorganize Malaviya Nagar. A very interesting project with participatory process of how it was going about the urban planning process. A lot of outreach, a lot of surveying, a lot of on-site work, as well as drawings and things like that. So it was a very, you never know what kind of draws the eye of the reviewer in your application process. But I would say stay authentic to yourself, but also be able to edit and curate your own work. And it's helpful to have somebody outside to look at it and see if it's getting too much, too detailed. At the end of the day, the information should flow. Like, think of it like a book. Somebody who may not know you at all, they may not want to get into too many of the details, but you want to show that you have a diverse set of skills, and what you're passionate about should come through.
Perfect. Thanks, Parul. I want to ask Anushree again that how did you go about choosing UAL, considering also that there was a foundation year, and how seamless is it to go from the foundation year into the main program?
I think for me, I chose UAL first of all because of the history. I love the city. I really like London. I like CSM. I like the people who study there. I like the courses they provide. So it was something that I really wanted to be involved in. And when I first went to do my foundation year, I was like 17 years old. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And I wanted a year where I could really flesh out like all the different options that are there in the creative industry. And that's why I got into product design and really involved myself in the craft. And I was really given the freedom to test different types of ideas. As we have tutors in foundation year, I had like some external support as well, and like good professional advice where they were being able to give me like constant feedback, like weekly feedback. And I thought that was something like really valuable. So that's what made like foundation year worth it for me. First year in foundation, the transition was easier for me for sure compared to like people who had just come in. But at the same time, I also felt like it was kind of a faster version of foundation year, if that makes sense. We were given like less freedom in first year, which will be given in second year, but more so that we can like actually develop our tangible skills. So that's also something to consider. And I would also say that when you're choosing your university, look into what type of university it is, because product design, for example, has like a more engineering-based idea and a creative-based idea, whereas CSM is a more creative university, and I find myself to be a more creative person, and that really drew me to CSM. So yeah.
Perfect, thanks. And Dave, how did you choose Emily Carr?
So for me, one of the most important things was the staff and like teachers and how they treat the kids. And Emily Carr had great like reviews and people online saying that it's like a family almost, and everyone's really sweet and nice, and they help you settle in and they help you be creative, and they also are very like open in the philosophy of teaching, so they're not too strict in what they teach you and make you learn like how to paint. It's more like how to paint a painting, not how to paint just like a line, right? So they make you actually think and do really creative work. as well as nurture you pretty much, and like they don't ever put you down. And even the reviews and the feedback we get is it's quite hands-on, and it's quite like it's not mean. You won't feel bad because of it.
Okay, okay. So it has a very nurturing sort of environment, and that's what you liked about it. Thanks, Dave. Shalina, I have a couple of questions for you now. So as a portfolio coach, when do you think a student should start preparing?
Yeah, typically I think by grade 9, 10 is when students start getting into design. Some area they're not quite sure at that point, but they know that they're creatively inclined. So I feel investing those 2 years in just kind of experimenting, getting on some hands-on skills is a good idea. And 10th and 11th is where I feel 11th grade is where you should be majorly working on your portfolio. So that by the time you're in grade 12, when you get into the application process, you should be done with about 70% of what you're working on. And then the last maybe 30% of the work is what you do in grade 12, because you have applications, you have your board exams, and a lot going on that year. So grade 11 is the key year, I feel, which you should give. And it doesn't hurt to kind of work on your own, or maybe, work with somebody 9th, 10th, where you give yourself 2 years to just freely experiment and not be in a rush. And I think, as I agree with, each them with their respective journeys, it's all about putting together who you are as a person. You need time to kind of build on a trajectory where there has to be some cohesion in what you're speaking about. The mediums should be diverse. You should have a lot of experimental work. It should show your process, but there has to be a synergy in what you want to express and how you're kind of curating it to put it across. So you need about 2 years comfortably to allow yourself to do that. But, sometimes students decide late, and, they want to explore other options. So then, depending on the time that, you have. But ideally, yes, 2 years.
2 years you need. Okay. I do have another question for you. See, these days, a lot of the students that come to us say we are not good at sketching, but we want to pursue design. So does that really matter today? That how much does the fact that they don't actually want to sketch matter?
I mean, it's not that every work in your portfolio has to display some tangible skills, but it is useful, definitely, I would say, to have, a set of tangible skills, because it allows you to execute your projects a little more effortlessly. So many times you are brainstorming with certain ideas, you're working with certain mediums. So when you have those skills, it's easier for you to execute. But having said that, you don't really have to have a lot of skill-based work in your portfolio. There are a lot of mediums you can work with where you're comfortable with. So at my studio, I do kind of encourage students to first identify their strengths and the mediums that they enjoy working in, and develop works on those lines. And on the side, also kind of work on building up, your skill sets. So those eventually land up helping you creating and executing your works. But definitely trying out, as many mediums as you can is something that, works well when you're developing your portfolio.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And any thoughts on that, Parul? I know sometimes you also guide some of our students. So any thoughts for you, that when do you think a student should start preparing, or do you think it matters whether they want to sketch or not?
Yeah, I agree with the fact that, you should get quite serious by 11th, 12th. That being said, I think that it's never, unlike, like admissions, that time frame that starts and you start getting things sort of on your head, and you get the stress of, building a portfolio. My suggestion would be, if you're creatively inclined, don't look at it like sort of a deadline, sort of like a thing that you have to accomplish, right? That definitely you should have in the back of your mind. But I would say anytime you're free, it can be late at night, it can be an early morning, it can be on the weekends, it can be your summer holidays, winter holidays, or on a holiday, vacation, whatever. I would say start experimenting whenever you can, right? Look up, there is no dearth of information about the kind of portfolios, the kind of work out there, right? There's nothing that's stopping you from just learning, just curating. Make a Pinterest board, start putting things together that inspire you. Inspiration doesn't come like at the drop of a hat when you want it, unfortunately. Like any writer will tell you, any artist, like all of you are already artists in the making or already are artists. So I would say just keep working on things. You never know what will become something. It's never about the end goal anyway. So just keep that passion alive and keep documenting everything. So whether it's a sketchbook, whether it's a sketch pad, it's a painting, whatever, it can be a doodle, whether you want to start working on collages, digital collages, that's fine. At the end of a while, you'll see that you have a body of work, and whether that needs to be refined or not, you can look at that later. But it's better to keep that interest alive and keep honing it, and not looking at it like a test or a deadline. That obviously will happen when you're right at the end and the edge of the application process. But creativity usually flows better when it's on your own time frame, right? So I would say just keep working on creative projects all the time, and then you have more of a body of work to choose from when the time is near.
Right. Particularly with creative fields, right? That's something you can't force yourself into, yeah? Okay, so Anushree, can you tell me what does a typical day in design school look like for you? Or can you describe a typical project or assignment in your program?
So my course is actually very free flowing. So answering this question would be, I'd rather make it like what a typical project would be like for me. So first of all, we have to go to uni compulsory, almost 3 times maximum a week, because that's when we have our lectures. But other than that, when it comes down to actually doing our project, it's really up to us and up to when we want to do it, which is something I do like a lot. But again, that's something people should keep in mind before they choose their universities. So in my university, I would describe my project as I separate it into 3 parts. So first I get my brief. The day I get the brief, I break it down. I figure out, okay, so what am I going to do for my research, my development, and for the final bit of it. Research, I try having my primary and secondary research and having a huge variety of primary research. So actually going and seeing competitor products, similar products, things that exist already in the market, talking to people who use such products or people who don't know about it, or all of that. Then secondary, looking online, after which I go into the development, where I get to go to the wood workshop, the metal workshop, go make things in the laser workshop, sometimes making it on 3D design, so making CAD models. I try involving my tutors by going and having conversations with them, or signing up for academic support, something we have in our university. And for the final week, I just refine it, finalize everything, really hone in on all the variations I've made. I try having one really specific thing and just changing the focal points of it rather than making completely different projects, which is something a lot of design students experience and struggle with, especially in the early on days. But once you get the hang of it, you get to your final bit and it's a satisfying submission. So that's what I would tell everyone, what my design process is like. And again, it can be different for everyone. And I'd recommend everyone here to search up design principles of their favorite designers. And once you find that out, you can go your own way. So, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Anushree. And what about you, Dev? So what does a typical day at look like for you, or what is a typical project that you would do in your program?
So for us also, we have very few classes. We only have about 3 or 4 classes a week. So and they're not really like mandatory. Like you have to go, but they're not very intense or anything. But again, the more hard part and the intense part comes in our projects. So usually our projects like they take a lot of time. So like a week and a half, and we're given maybe half a month to a month to finish each project. And you never have to do research or anything, but they expect really good work. Like you can't make just anything in last minute. You'll know if it's last minute. But they're very fun and interesting, and you end up doing a lot of research and stuff anyway, just because of what they need, what they require. So that's all I would say is that if you should know your stuff. You can't go there and then try to learn design before while doing a project. You should always have an idea or be able to do a basic project without having to learn on the spot. Otherwise, it gets very difficult.
Okay, so a lot of flexibility in terms of when you can submit, no deadlines as such, right?
Not really, and if there are deadlines, they tend to extend the work by like a week anyway, because most kids don't do it on time.
So is that hard, adhering to a no deadline kind of thing?
No, not really. It benefits you because you start expecting it, so you start realizing that if I work, maybe like I'll probably get an extra week anyway, so I don't have to be done, but you should try and finish on time, regardless.
Okay, all right. And what about for you, Aditi? What does a typical day look like for you at SVA?
I'll start by saying that the typical week for an SVA student is that they'll have less than 5 days a week of class, but as an honors student, I generally have classes every day of the week. And along with my studio classes or art classes, which are basically, drawing, painting, computer art skills, a comic specific class. Maybe I'm just giving some examples you might get in your foundation year, your freshman year. Other than those, I also have some classes well, you get to choose them from sophomore year onwards, but freshman year I had classes in history, art history, philosophy, English literature, etc. So every day would be classes ranging either from 2 hours to 8 hours, depending on what classes you have on the day. And once I'm done with classes, depending on how much time I have after, I usually go to the studio again to work, or I would explore New York a bit. Oftentimes, I'd line up gallery exhibitions for myself to attend, or a lot of artists who I've been following for years now actually also live in New York. So I take the opportunity to go meet them and make connections with them and essentially just do some networking. Other than that, on top of that, because New York is such a cultural hub, um, I like exploring the city outside the art scene as well, maybe going to a restaurant or shopping or just having fun, things like that.
Right.
So,
okay.
yeah.
Thanks, Aditi. And Parul, what would you say? So when you were a student, or now when you meet with students, what do you think their assignments should look like, or how should they address design challenges and things like that?
Thanks, Kritika. I think that's a really good question. So it's really important to be structured, have a very clear train of thought. So like you make a wireframe or you make a template before you begin a report or you begin any kind of project, I think it's very important to look at your portfolio and your SOP, statement of purpose, together and see that they are kind of lining up. But also the way you develop your portfolio should be quite clear in terms of the outline, right? So you should know what you have. So first, I would suggest having all your creative projects sort of laid out, whether it's in front of you or it's digitally, whatever. Have that collected. Secondly, I would say try and categorize them into types. See which ones can be out of those, which ones you would like to pick and choose because you can't showcase everything of yours. You want to put your best foot forward. Now, some of those projects may need a little bit more work, refinement, and that's totally fine. You can make the portfolio as a project of its own. So sometimes we need to add a little bit of content, like a diagram, like a little bit of text, a summary, whatever. So have that clear, what needs work, which ones are ready to go. And simultaneously, what you're doing also is, Aditi was also saying, like, getting inspiration, being out there, doing research online, but also in person. That's great. And seeing what kind of references you are inspired by, right? So then you have that on the side. On one side, you're putting your own work together. The other side, you're looking at reference portfolios, works that are really cool, why they inspire you, and seeing which ones you can do are doable by you, right? You don't have 5 years to do this. You have a set limited amount of time. So out of that, if you say, okay, I have this kind of work, this kind of work, this kind of work, this kind of work, maybe you don't have every kind of page, won't be a different medium, but even then, that's fine. If you have a variety within those categories, that's also great. So you're showing variety, but you're organized in how you're showing it. Like you're going through a story, right? It could be scale, it could be large to small, small to large. It could be very structured to very fluid. I mean, I don't know. It could be whatever concept you have, but that shows creativity in terms of information flow, right? And then what you have in there can be complicated, but you have to simplify it to the basic common denominator. You have to make it so simple that they say you really know your subject when you can simplify something, right? I'm just rephrasing here, but that's what you should do. So I told some students that you're stepping, once you have your work and you know what to do, basically you have to step out of the artist's role as your creative role, and you have to step into the editor's role. So imagine you're making a film, but you are the artist, you are the actor, you are the director, the producer, and the editor. So now you have to step out of the actor's role and you have to step into the core editing role. So imagine how much hours of footage they have in a film. But at the end of the day, it's 2 hours or people are just going to be done. They don't have attention after that. So you have to be very, you have to keep honing that. And I would say that's the most time-consuming thing. How to get it crisp, how to get your work in such an interesting way, like communicated. And that's the skill that will take months,
Right. So keep it simple, keep it concise, and that's the trick, right?
Okay. Yeah, your projects may not be simple, but you have to simplify them in how you show it.
Got it. All right. And Shalina, I wanted to ask you, students, they just love to do artwork on their own, maybe in a sort of non-structured way. So where does a portfolio coach sort of come in there?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important for students to explore on their own. Like Parul also said that, there's never a time to start. You just, pick up and start and get inspired by, things around you. And I think collecting all that work without any pressure is the important part when you start your journey. And then towards the end, you're kind of putting it together. You want to have like a clear definition of what you want to project, what you want to say, what are your main concerns, and how your trajectory comes across as the viewer. And you need to sift through and edit. So I think one important, role for the mentor, the coach, is to kind of enable the student to be able to sift through his own work and kind of edit it, put together. And I think that process, in that process, you also land up, evolving and realizing, what you're arriving at consistently. It tells you about you and your work and how you want to take the next step and develop it. So I think that's a process in itself, and it's a back and forth. And while you're doing it is when you realize what is it that you want to kind of put together. So in that sense, it's always good to have a coach or a mentor to guide you through that process. Having said that, you're going to be doing it on your own. You'll be evolving it. It's your personal journey. You need to be honest with it. And great if you have someone who can, you can communicate your work to and get a fresh perspective, be a little objective about it, then dive back in. I think, that's a process that's helpful for students.
And what is one last little piece of advice that you would like to leave our students with?
I think the important thing is that you have to be passionate and enjoying your journey. You need to be honest. And what I tell most students is that you have to look inward and outward. You have to see what's outside and then bring it inward. Your journey has to start from inward. What I see most students struggling is that there's so much information, and access. Sometimes, it can dilute you and your inward journey. So at the same time, we need to take inspirations. We need to take what we're getting and then sift through that very carefully, look inward and see what we need to pick, what we need to choose, establish that connection. So that process of editing is very important. So the piece of advice that I give all students is that you have to look inward, you have to be honest to your journey, and then take whatever's coming, sift through, process it, and move on with your work. You'll be experimenting. You have to allow your work to tell you a lot about yourself, what you want to do, what you keep coming back to. And if you're honest with that, you will land up enjoying the process.
Right. Thanks, Parul. Thanks, Shalina, so much for that. And Parul, what is one piece of advice that you would like to leave our students with?
Thanks. Yeah, I would say I agree with everything said before me, but I would say don't get overwhelmed. It can be an overwhelming process. Break it up into small pieces. Try and look at it as a very, you're passionate individuals. That's why you want to go into design. But at some level, you try and make it as objective as possible in the way you go about your work. The more structured you can be, the more helpful it'll be for you. So break it down into bits. Try and create, categories in your mind, and do things that will help you. Take breaks, but at the same time, because this should be something that you're interested in, this field, keep looking online at references. There's so much to learn from other students that have gone through this process visually, because it's a visual medium, all of these fields. You can really get inspired, and it can give you a lot of guidance in how you visualize your own work, how you want to portray it. Don't think that you're isolated and doing all of this alone. It's always good to have a mentor, but if you don't have a mentor, there are a lot of online available pieces of work that you can look at, what portfolios people have already made, and the variety. And of course, there's amazing work, but you don't need to get overwhelmed with that. You have a personal story, and you just have to find how to make it meaningful and edit it to be a crisp, authentic version of yourself. That's it.
Great, thank you. And Dave, do you have any advice that you would like to give aspiring students applying to Canada and other design schools?
If I were to give one last piece of advice, it would be, it's very fun. Like it can be like long hours of working and very detailed and fine things. But at the end of the day, that's what you like and that's what you have fun in. So enjoy it. It's really fun, especially if you really like your discipline. Like there's barely feels like working because you're having fun while doing the art. Also, everyone in art school is very nice and friendly because everyone's like you. So that shouldn't put you off at all.
Thanks, Dave. And Aditi, what would you like to tell our students?
I think this is a little bit an extension of what was already said, but perfectionism is the antithesis of growth. When it comes to art and other creative fields, you have to fail a lot and make a lot of bad work, that you may be scared to make in order to learn what you actually like to make. And in order to do this, you have to learn not to be affected emotionally by the judgment of other people, whether it's your peer group, whether it's a critique that you hear in class, whatever. Just take it as a criticism of your work, not a criticism of you, and figure out how you can use that for your growth. But yeah, don't obsess about everything being perfect because you're not gonna get anywhere if you don't make anything. So yeah.
Thanks, Aditi. And anything from you, Anushree? Anything you'd like to add to that?
Okay, if I'd have to add one thing, it would just be that be like open to learning, open to communicate with new people. I think my favorite thing about design is that it's kind of open-ended. You can learn from others, you can take from others, you can give what you want to give. So don't limit yourself, don't be like scared to show your work. Someone is going to get your journey, and no one is like, there might be people who are against your work even if you think it's the best, but there's also going to be someone who supports you in that. So believe in yourself and try finding your crowd, and it'll be all fine. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, Anushree, Aditi, Dev, Shalina, and Parul. I will now pass it on to Ankit, who will lead you guys through the medicine session. Yeah, thanks, guys, so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kritika, and all the design students and the counselors. Moving on to the next part, which is medicine. I know there are a lot of students and parents here today who wants to know about pursuing medicine abroad because it's a complex area. My name is Ankit, and I work with STEM students in INOME as a counselor. And I do work with a couple of medicine students. And today we have a very good opportunity to interact with students studying abroad in different countries in the area of medicine. So let me introduce all of them quickly, and then we'll start. So we have Debbie with us, Debbie is here, I guess. Yes, hi, Debbie. So Debbie she helps a lot of students who plans to pursue medicine abroad. In fact, her daughter, Prerna, who is also here today with us, she's currently studying in Charles University in Prague, and Debbie helped her a lot because it's a complex area. Apart from that, like I've told you, Prerna is here. Apart from that, we have Hriday, who is currently studying in Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. Then we have Namya, who is studying in University of Lancashire in England. And then we have Nish here, who is studying in University of Szeged. I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but I think
it's Szeged.
Szeged, okay.
Szeged, yeah.
Okay. In Hungary. So, great. Welcome all of you, and thank you so much for taking time out for this. So the whole idea of today's conversation is, and in fact, we'll go with the flow, starting from that. Why do you choose these universities or these countries? Because it's very important for our students and parents to understand that what is the prospect, what is the proposition to choose uh, a medicine degree out compared to India. I know one reason is acceptance rates or the competitiveness in India, but apart from that, what are the other factors? Second is, what is the application process? Third, how is now you're there, you understand the overall scenario, how do you see it? And fourth is, what are the opportunities post programs? Okay. So before I move on to all these phases one by one, I would like to start with Debbie, since she's she's helped so many students who plan to study abroad for medicine. Debbie, how do you see the overall scenario? Why do people go out to study medicine? What is your take on it? You're not audible, I guess. You're on mute. Still on mute. Yes, now it.
Better? Yeah.
Yes, please go on.
So, yes. So my journey to go ahead and, with with medical studies, finding out about it was when my daughter wanted to do medicine, but that was years ago. And that year, if you remember, 2016, and it brings back memories to this year because it's as chaotic. NEET was very, very chaotic. And that's when we quickly started looking for colleges abroad, honestly. There was no other reason. So there was little time and we started looking for colleges abroad. And this year I can see it's getting repeated. everyone knows it's on the newspaper, it's super chaotic. That was one reason. And of course, another reason is better training, I think, which when we did our entire research, we realized how good the training was. Prerna can tell you more on it. Ankit, just to change that, she's not a student anymore. She's been working with NHS for quite some time now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, glad to know that. Wonderful. Great.
Yes. So she's a SHO in NHS now, which she can say in her own introduction. And so EU, I think, provides that edge of training, and you're with so many international students and professors who bring in much more, I would say, to the table because of their years of experience teaching so many, international students and in a different atmosphere altogether. I think Prerna and the other students can tell you better how everything, the simulators, their processes, everything. I mean, the training is at a different level. Also, what are you aiming at is very important. What I keep telling students, like, when we've done sessions individually with your student clients, that what are you looking at? Do you want to go ahead and practice in India? Please study in India. Do you want to go ahead and practice elsewhere? Please study there or somewhere which helps you study there. I mean, that's always the perspective that I lend to people, to students. Right. Yes. And when you study from a EU university, then the degree is valid all over EU and UK till now. Hopefully it will go on. The Brexit has not affected that. Also, your studies oriented towards that, and you don't need to appear for another exam. Imagine your degree being valid in so many countries as against here, where you study and your degree is valid only here. So please ask yourself, where do I want to practice, and go accordingly. There is no other reason. There should not be any other reason.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense, actually. So the takeaway here is that first we need to decide that where do we want to settle ourselves. And that makes a lot of sense. Great. Wonderful. So we have Prerna here, and sorry, I'll correct it myself. Currently, she's practicing with NHS. So we'll get more insights from Prerna, actually. So Prerna, we wanted to know from you that I know you have been studying there in Prague, but I'm sure you would have some exposure to India education system also. So how do you compare both of them in terms of curriculum and post-program opportunities also? How do you see overall scenario?
So, am I audible?
Yes.
Perfect.
Please go.
So I would say the entrance is obviously slightly different. For Charles University, it was equal weightage of interview and your entrance exams. The subjects were the same, so it's your physics, your chemistry, and biology. But I would say even within the subjects, it has a lot of equal weightage. In fact, biology was the largest section. I believe it's the opposite. I think in India, physics is the most difficult section to crack, to actually get into a medical college. Yeah, to get into NEET. Other than that, yeah, so the interview does hold quite a bit of weightage, and obviously any references from your high school professors and things like that, it does help along with your board marks. Prague was a 6-year course, so that includes your internship towards the end. I would say, like Mom said, the training is really, really good. The professors, they have a lot of years of experience. And compared to India, I would say the main difference is the way you're tested. India probably vigorously tests you as well, but in Charles, you have to be used to being very vigorously tested. We have only verbal examinations. Up till 5th year, it's with one examiner, and then 6th year, which is your state or licensing exams, you have a board of examiners. India, I believe it's written exams, from what I understand, and then you also have 5 hours on the side as well.
Okay.
So curriculum-wise, that's the basic breakdown. The subjects, from what I've compared, since I have a lot of Indian colleagues over here in the NHS who've studied in India, the subjects seem the same. In fact, even the years that you start, the subject seems the same. So we all started our anatomy, histology, all of that in first year. Third year onwards, we started to get a little bit more clinical. But
Okay.
I would say what we got is a lot of advanced technology. So we had something called Siemens from third year onwards, which is a fully simulation dummy. This is a dummy that literally can vomit on the spot if you give the command. So I think it helps students practice with a lot less anxiety because it's something that can simulate a real patient, but you're not actually doing anything on a real patient. So there's a lot more room for error. And I think where there's room for error, you can learn a lot more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And other than that, we got to see Da Vinci robot surgeries from fourth year, fifth year onwards and things like that. So I would say when it comes to technology, Europe has a lot to offer.
Right. I wanted to ask you one question, Prerna. Currently, you're practicing with NHS. So
Yeah.
I believe this is NHS UK which you're practicing with,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. So how does it work? That's what I was really intrigued to know. Like you have studied in Charles University. So NHS UK, do they simply allow students from other countries of Europe to come to?
Yes. So the good part about this is that, just like Mum said, even though Brexit did take place, it hasn't really affected the exam situation. So currently, if you have studied in the European Union, you get a direct entry. You can receive your GMC registration in about 3-4 months without any exam, no problem. You have to just take a small English exam called the IELTS or the OET, which is the same as Indian students as well, or any international medical graduate. As soon as you receive your GMC, you're completely open to job applications, and then you just apply and then
Wonderful. That's
interview.
great to know.
Yeah.
But apart from that, what are other opportunities? Suppose if someone doesn't want to go to NHS after
Yeah.
Charles University, so what are the other avenues?
So all over European Union, after you've graduated from Charles University, you have a direct license. All you need to do is pass the individual language exam. So what a lot of our students did is they got started in second, third year itself. So let's say Germany, Sweden, Norway, any of these countries, as soon as they got into clinical years, they just started getting familiar with these languages. And as soon as they graduated, they passed these language exams and they already had the license. When it comes to US, I would say it's the exact same pathway as an Indian medical graduate. So you have to take your step 1, your step 2, and then CK. And then once you get certified with ECFMG, as soon as you're done with these 3 exams, you can match into a residency.
Right. Actually, I was about to ask this question about entry to US. So, statistically, how many students usually go from, let's say, in Charles University to practice in US
So
every year?
honestly, genuinely, we have, from my batch, we have 4 people who matched into a US residency, which is relatively less from the earlier years, but I would say that's a little more voluntary. So earlier it used to be about 10-15% of the batch used to end up in US. And right now they're all working doctors in excellent hospitals. But this year I would say, I think the want to go to US has decreased slightly. So we only have 4 graduates. Either way, they've all got into residencies that they've wanted, extremely competitive ones as well. Like 2 of them are in ortho. And yeah, that's about it. Oh, that's another thing I wanted to say. So Charles gives you this opportunity if you're one of the students who are interested in it and you have the grades and you've been doing well at uni, it gives you this opportunity. If you want, you get to do this exchange program where for about 3 months in your 5th year, you get to go to Mayo Clinic in Rochester in US for a fellowship or an attachment. And this looks excellent on your CV when you're actually applying for US residencies, because the one thing US really values is previous work experience in the US, or at least observerships or attachments.
Perfect. One question is taking US exams, which is step 1 and step 2 exams. So you're
Mhm.
supposed to take both the exams after 6th year, or you can take the first one even after the 4th year or the 5th year as well.
You can take the first one after second year if it's up to you, if you're ready.
Perfect. Perfect. But you'll have to complete all 6 years in Charles University. There's no way that you can do your clinical rotation in US rather than in um, Charles University. Is there an
No,
option?
you absolutely can. So 6th year is completely up to you where you do your clinical rotations. So depending on the country, a lot of students branched out. So all the US aspirants went off to US, and then they did different
Oh.
hospitals, rotations at different hospitals there. So you can do your 6th year entirely in US.
Wonderful. Last question, I'll just go a little backward about the application process. Since Charles University has different schools under it, right?
Yeah.
So you have to apply separately to all these schools and take their exams separately. Is that correct?
You do, yes. So all 5 of them
Okay.
have different exams.
So how do you decide which one to apply to, or you apply to all of them usually?
You can apply to all of them, but I would say it's better to make a decision from before. There's a lot of information on each individual campus on the website as well.
Okay.
So there's obviously first faculty is in Prague, and the rest are in different cities. So it would depend on what interests you. Each city has different things to offer. I would say the medical program is the exact same. So
Okay.
other than that, you can just decide. The fees and things like that have really slight discrepancies. So you can decide based on the city because the education
Wonderful.
is the exact same.
Thank you so much, Prerna, for all this
Right.
information. And I'm sure it's quite helpful for all the people who are listening to it. Thank you so much. I know you need to leave, so please carry
I
on.
have work.
Yeah.
But yes.
Thank you so much. See you
Thank
soon.
you.
If we'll have any questions related to this university, I'll message you, or one of our colleagues will message you. It'll be great if you can answer
Absolutely.
them later.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
sure. Thank you so much
Moving
for having
on,
me.
thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye. Moving on to another university, we have Nish here, and who is currently in Hungary. So, which is not very far from Prague. So we thought that let's just talk to you about it. How do you see this overall scenario in Hungary? Why did you go there? Could you tell us more about it?
Okay, so initially when I was looking, my parents had a few friends who were also in the UK and in India who suggested Hungary, and then I went with that. I applied to the University of Szeged specifically. There was an application process similar to what Prerna said, but in Hungary, we have 5 different medical universities in 5 different cities. So you apply for each of them individually. So I applied for Szeged and I gave an entrance exam for it. And once I got the acceptance, I was accepted into first year medicine in the University of Szeged. Szeged is the 3rd largest city in Hungary. So you have universities in Budapest, in Szeged, in Pécs, and in Debrecen. So you can apply to 4 of these universities, and they're all basically the same. As for the application process was quite straightforward. It was just an exam. You have to give a motivation letter, and then you have an exam in physics, chemistry, biology, and then an oral interview as well. And it was kind of at the same level as what we study in 12th standard, so I didn't have to prepare extra or too much for it either. Yeah, I think it was a similar process as for what Prerna said. It's also a 6-year program where you start, the first 2 years are more basic medicine, and then it goes into clinical medicine, and then the 6th year is the internship year, where for the entire year, I think it's 40 weeks, you intern in different hospitals and different specialties. Similar to what she said as well, we have a program in the 5th year where you can go to the US if you are interested in the US. The only difference I would say now is I graduated last year, and the difference is for the UK, I think from 2025, you are no longer able to get the license. I think you need to sit for the UK MLE. So if you do come to the EU, I feel like you just need to check with GMC whether you will still be eligible to just get the license or whether you have to sit for the UK MLE. I'm not too sure about the facts, but some of my friends who graduated this year were saying that it's their last chance to apply for the license without sitting for this UK MLE exam. So I would suggest that people take this into consideration before they choose whether to go to the UK or whether to study in EU.
Okay.
Similar to what she said again is that once you graduate from Hungary, you can basically, your license is valid everywhere in the world. It just depends on whether you have to give a licensing exam or not.
Exam.
So
Okay.
within the EU, you're able to work. All you need is a language exam, which is a C1 level language exam. If you want to go to
Right.
Germany or France, wherever you want to go within the EU. For the UK, like she said, IELTS, OET, and if from next year you might have to give the UK MLE. You can go to the US, Australia. There's endless opportunities
Right.
and options. You can go back to India as well if you said the FMGE, I think. Other than that, I would say that it's quite similar to Prague, or most of this region is quite similar in terms of the education and the opportunities you receive. I think the only thing is that, yeah, exams are pretty rigorous. You have to sit and study all your topics. You can be failed if you don't reach the level of expectation that they are receiving. We also have practicals and orals. So you have to be able to pass both those exams, and sometimes as an average, sometimes you just have to, there's no average and you have to pass every exam. So I think that was one thing that surprised me when I came here, and it is something that stresses you out a little bit, because the level of expectation is very high and they hold you to a certain standard. So you can't just pass, you could do like 100 topics and then you missed one and you could still fail the exam if you were to get that topic. So it's not like India, where it might be that you have a written exam and there's like a 60% pass. It's more
Right.
like 100%
Exactly.
pass rate.
Yeah, it's
If
either
you
pass or fail. It's 0 and
Yeah,
1 binary.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And a lot depends on, because a lot of the exams are oral, it depends on how you speak and how you're able to convey what you understand to the professor. So it can get a bit more stressful compared to like a written exam. I would
Okay.
also like to add that in Hungary, when you graduate, you get a master's degree, because in the fourth
Okay.
year we are supposed to do something called a thesis. And then in the
Okay.
sixth year, you defend your thesis. So in the fourth year, you pick your topic for your thesis, and then you write your thesis. It could be like a scientific survey or a literature review, anything you wish for. And then you have 2 years to write that thesis, and then you defend it in the sixth year, along with your state board exams. So when you
Okay.
graduate, you're basically a master's student, and that's what you're treated as in Hungary when it comes to permits and everything else.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's mostly it. I feel
Okay.
like my experience has been pretty good.
Thank you so much. I have one question. How many, as per the statistics, how many students usually go to UK to practice at NHS from the whole pool compared to going to other European or US as a destination?
Okay, so in my university, a lot of the students come from Norway or Sweden or Scandinavian countries, or also a lot of British Indian students that come to Hungary. Usually people that speak their own languages, for example, if they're from Spain, they go back to Spain or Italy or France,
Okay.
whatever. The most of the students you will see going to the UK are mostly the foreign students outside of the EU. And
Right.
in that sense, it depends. The options are either you learn a language, you go to the NHS, or you go to the US. As of now, I feel, I'll be completely honest, in the last 1 year, I think it has become a bit difficult with the NHS due to a lot of the saturation that's been going on. I think we can see from Indian medical students as well, or graduates, that people are filling in 100 applications a day and all of this stuff. So I feel like it's shifted people's focus from the UK to the EU, because the work-life balance in the EU I personally feel like it's much better. And the salaries are comparable, if I'm being honest. Opportunities are comparable as well. And
Right.
I was recently in the UK as well, and I saw it firsthand. And that's when I had a little bit of a shift in my own thought process as well. So yeah, I think it just depends again on where you want to be. I think at the end of the day, medicine is very long, and it can, like, your medical degree is just your basic degree. You still have to do a lot more after that. So I would say, see where the postgraduate degrees are longer, shorter, see which country you really want to live in, because you have to be able to take whatever comes to you. the difficulties that you face in that country. And sometimes it becomes difficult to change your residency. You can start in the UK and you don't like it, but the minute you go somewhere else, you might have to start from zero. So I would say that see which country you really want to be in and then decide, as was previously said.
I have one last question from you, Nish.
Yeah.
We have got a couple of questions. Divya and Shubha, I'll take your questions a little later because we'll cover those topics. I have a question from Shweta, which says, Prerna mentioned that during the 6th year, the kid can go to US to do the residency. Is that arranged by college, or does the child has to find an opportunity in US himself or herself?
Okay, so your 6th-year internship is fully dependent on yourself. You find the opportunities, you contact the hospitals, you arrange your stay, you arrange your internship, and you pay for it as well. So everything is done by you.
Okay. Debbie, I wanted to ask you here that this case is not with universities in Grenada, right? Because they arrange the clinical rotations themselves. They take this responsibility completely, right?
No, so the thing is, in most universities, if you want to, you do it with that teaching hospital. It's arranged by that. That's an option always by the university. You don't have to do anything about it. Only if you don't want that and you want an option outside of your teaching hospital is when you have to arrange on your own.
Right.
So,
but what I'm trying to say here is that in universities like St. George University in Grenada, they already have collaborations in US. So that means if somebody is aspired to go there to practice in US, then that could be a little easier route than studying in other European countries. That's what I'm asking you.
Yes, it could be because you'll have the US experience already in your. That's the advantage on your CV. I would say.
Thank you so much, Nish. Thank you. I'll move on to other students, other participants here. So we have got Hriday with us, and we have got Jhallak also now here. I'm sorry, Jhallak, I didn't introduce you earlier. Jhallak is also studying in University of Lancashire. So Hriday, my question to you is that so let me just say again, Hriday is currently studying with Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, right? So how do you differentiate? Sorry, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a medicine program in Ireland versus medicine program in UK specifically, if you're aware, or maybe Namya and Jhallak can also add on to this point?
I'd say that the main difference, especially in RCSI compared to the other universities, even in Ireland, is essentially RCSI is very international. So I think it's about like 60% of our university is international students. And a lot of them want to go to the US. And a lot of them are from the US, and US takes 8 years, so they study here and then go back. Because this is also a pretty reputed university, like it's 300 something years old, like it's very well known. And so what they did was they completely inversed how they usually teach. So usually medical schools teach like pathology, histology, and then clinical, they go like that, but they teach in my uni how the USMLE goes, where they teach cardio and everything inside cardio, and then gastro and everything inside gastro. And so I feel like that's the big difference in terms of RCSI. This is a recent change, but then people are really liking it now. And it's led to really good USMLE results as well. And so I feel like that's a thing. And then the continuous testing is another one. So we have a test every 2 weeks. Since the first week of first year. And what that ended up being was not just like, it's not written tests, it's only multiple choice. And we have anatomy cadaver tests where like a group of students stand around a cadaver with an examiner, and the examiner points to something and they say like, oh, what does this do? What does this do? Where does this attach? So that's kind of like one thing that I asked around, even like my other like Irish medical school friends, and they're like, our college doesn't have this.
Okay.
And so that's a pretty exclusive thing to mine.
Okay. So yours is a 6-year program, right?
It's 5 years.
Yours is a 5-year program. Okay. And in terms of post-program or in post-program opportunities, so usually what happens, are the students, majority of students, are they going to US? Do they go to UK, or they practice in Ireland? What do they do usually?
So a lot of them go to so there's a bunch of different demographics in my uni. So there's something called RUMC that you can pick when you apply. So
Okay.
RUMC is 2.5 years in Ireland and 2.5 years in Malaysia,
Okay.
and you graduate with an Irish degree. And so
Okay.
a lot of Malaysians are there in my university because of that. So they go back to Malaysia, and then a lot go to the US. No one really goes to the UK. They prefer Ireland because recently NHS, in terms of the pay, Ireland has gone up. So I talked to a fifth-year student of mine. I mean, not fifth year, like a fifth-year student who's a friend of mine, and he was telling me that he got offers in Dublin in Ireland and in central London, but he picked Dublin because like the finances worked out better.
Right.
And so pretty much everyone who applies to say UK, Ireland, everyone really applies to Ireland because with like both UK and Ireland, you don't need an entrance exam because they have like an agreement, these two countries.
Okay.
But
Okay.
then Ireland gets picked more.
Okay. We have got one question here from Shubha, which she's asking that how tough are these licensing exams? So, for example, in your case, let's talk about USMLE after completing your degree from here. So, basis on your interaction with other senior students, how tough it is? What is this? What are the stats according to you?
So my university has good stats with USMLE. So we have a 90% match rate, which means like out of everyone who wrote it, 90% of them got
Incredible.
in. And
That's
it's,
incredible.
yeah, but because of shortages, like it's slightly been dipping because both US and Canada both have like shortages in terms of job spaces, but pretty much
Yeah.
90% pass rate is what it means.
Okay.
It's hard, but because of my curriculum, the way it's geared like with that exam, the people in my uni find it a lot easier.
Okay. So do they go after fifth year or do they go after fourth year for a clinical rotation or for a residency in US?
So residency in US, so I've finished second year, but I'm gonna write my final USMLE step 1 after third, and
Okay.
then step 2, and then the CK.
Okay. So you'll write step 2 CK. When will you write it? In the fourth year or fifth year?
Fourth year, and then I
Fourth
submit
year.
my application.
So can you go and practice in US in the fifth year?
After fifth year, yes. So I have to
After
apply
fifth year. So you'll complete your 5 years in Ireland first and then you'll go, right?
yeah, because I need my Irish license as well.
Okay, wonderful. Apart from your university in Ireland, what are other universities one can consider which are equally good and especially for international students? Because for them, it matters most that the university quality has to be really good. What do you think about it?
So what I've heard is for international students outside of RCSI, the best one is UCD, University
Okay.
College Dublin.
Dublin.
And that's because their medicine program is very big. It's got way more students than ours does, and they have like a very good infrastructure around it. And they're
Okay.
attached to some of the biggest hospitals in the city. And so a lot of people pick it because of that. And the campus life is another thing, where UCD has this giant campus with a lake.
Okay.
So that's another thing that drives a lot of people to pick it.
And how about TCD?
TCD, from what I've heard, is very, very competitive.
Okay.
But I've heard that the UCD and RCSI's medical programs have been better than TCD's.
Makes sense. Wonderful. Great. So now thank you so much, Hriday, for all this information. We might come back to you for one or two questions. We have Namya and Jhallak, both are studying in University of Lancashire in England right now. And I wanted to ask from you guys that could you please share a pathway to pursue a medicine program in UK? Because now let's go a little backward. What is the application process? How the program looks like? And what is the scenario of NHS right now, as per your understanding?
So the application process is, before you apply, you would do the UCAT for any of the unis, or you can do the BMAT, depending on which uni you want to apply to. So me and Jhallak both did the UCAT, and that's how we applied to UCAN. So when we applied, UCAN didn't use our UCAT score, but now they've added that to their application. So you would have to have a UCAT score that they would consider to be able to apply now. And then obviously you would do your interview as well. And then once you've applied, the pathway is you do your course. So our course is 5 years. You can intercalate in the 4th year if you want and do a 6-year degree as well. But you would do the 5 years, and then you have 2 years of foundation training where you get placed anywhere in the UK to do those 2 years of foundation training. And we have a lot of international students as well. So there are pathways if you want to go to the US. Again, you can do step 1, step 2, and then all the licensing exams.
Right, absolutely. Again, I'll ask the same question from you as well, that do the students usually go to US to practice after starting here, or do all of them mainly stick to NHS after this? What do they do usually in your university?
So what most people end up doing is that once they graduate from UCLan and they do their foundation year 1, year 2 training in the UK. Because once you've done those 2 years, you're credible in the UK. So even if you decide where else, whether it be the US or any other country, you can always come back to the UK because you've done those.
Makes sense.
So most of our seniors have decided to do that. And the ones that are still considering going to the US, they usually take their step 2 in year 3, year 4, because once you're done with year 2, you have all the knowledge for the step 2 exam. Step 1, sorry. And then for the step 2, they usually do it in 5th year because you don't have much going on in 5th year. You have like maybe 2 exams and you end really early. So you have time on your hands to prepare for that. And then once you do your 2 years of training here, get credited, then they decide to move to the US.
Yeah, makes sense. Definitely. Great. Wonderful. So let's take a couple of questions now. We have a question from Divya, that what is the financial comparison for medical programs across these geographies, as well as access to scholarship to Indian nationals? So maybe Debbie, if you can help me out with this. I have some data with me, which I can share. So in terms of financial comparison, so if I look at Charles University, as per my understanding, cost of attendance of a year is somewhere around 35,000 euros, if I'm not wrong, Debbie.
Yeah, it's about the tuition fee is about less than $15,000 a year.
Less than $15,000. Okay, less than $15,000, and then we can add another maybe 15,000 euros. That would be around $10,000 as lodging and boarding fee. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So overall, $25,000 is something we can assume for Charles University. What about UK, Namya and Jhallak?
So it depends on the college. So like all of them have different fee structures, but it would be around, so all of them, it would be around 40 to 45,000 pounds a year just for the fees. And then lodging. But again, university, like central London will be expensive.
Absolutely. Right. How about you, Nish? Is it quite similar to what Debbie shared with us, $25,000?
Yeah, I just checked the recent fees before I got on. So it's around 16,000 euros per year. And in the last year, it's half. So just 7,900 euros if you are doing 20 weeks of practice, the internship year within the university. And as for stay, I would take around 800 euros per month because of inflation. It was lesser before that, but
okay. And how about you, Hriday, in Ireland? What is the scenario?
It's the same sort of fees as Namya and Jhallak said. Like it's about 50,000 euros a year.
Okay.
But it's
only
5 years, so.
So that's a tuition fee, right?
Yeah, tuition fee and then lodging, everything is separate.
It's separate. So UK and Ireland is definitely way more expensive than other countries in Europe. Wonderful, great. And one more question she has asked: what about the access to scholarship for international students and especially Indian students? Do they have opportunities? Any of you would like to participate? How about you?
In Hungary, we have this thing called a Hungaricum stipendium, where I think you have to sit some sort of an exam and then you get selected. I think you can look it up probably, but I knew a few students from other countries who did come on this. So the fee is basically paid for. And then you also get some sort of like a certain amount of money monthly from the government. And you also get the social security card and everything. So you're not basically paying much at all. You only are probably paying for extra things that you want to do, like travel, or if you want to live in a better home or whatever. But they usually give you like, I don't know the conversion in rupees, but maybe like 20,000, 30,000 rupees. And the fees are paid for already by the government.
That's for international students, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And how many students usually get such kind of scholarships?
I don't really know the rate from India, but I knew like a few students in the medical program who had that. There weren't like that many because most of the students are EU, like European students. But I think you can try. I'm not really sure about the numbers. I think there's been more now after the Russia-Ukraine war. There's been more scholarships, so you could
Are these
check that.
merit-based scholarships or are these financial aids?
I think I'm not really sure. I know that there's an exam that you have to sit, and if you're within the top students, then you get that scholarship.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. How about you guys, Hriday? Are there scholarships for international students in Ireland?
Yeah, there are. There's like very few that you get essentially 1 year of your fees off. And that's only for like international students who have like exceptional high school results. So you apply for it in like the first month of coming.
Right.
And
Right.
so you have to try for that. But other than that, you have like, so in third year for one semester, you have Erasmus, like an Erasmus grant that you could get. So for half the semester, you can go somewhere and they'll finance it.
All right. Debbie, what is the scenario in Czech Republic
Charles?
for scholarships?
So in Czech Republic, both Charles and Masaryk, which is another very good university, they don't have a scholarship as such. It's more like rewarding. There's no separate exam, but students who score above a particular percentage throughout the year, you get back a very small amount. It's about 10% of your fee. It's refunded to you. You can call it a reward or a refund, whatever. It's like that. So it's not exactly a scholarship, but yeah, it's something that kind of inspires you to do better.
How about UK, Namya, and Jhallak?
There are barely any scholarships that are offered in the UK. If they are, they're extremely hard to get. Our university per se doesn't really offer any to international students.
Yeah, and even other universities that I looked at did not offer any.
Right. No, I know it's very competitive. Correct. We have another question from Shubha here. She would like to know about the entrance exam preparation after grade 12, from when to prepare and if any extra classes needed. So let me start answering these questions and you guys also please patch in. So as far as UK is concerned, earlier there used to be BMAT and UCAT, but now they have scrapped BMAT. There is only one examination, which is UCAT, and which has 5 sections. These are quantitative ability, situational judgment question, abstract reasoning question. So it is more like a critical thinking, reasoning related exam. So it does require some external preparation because some of the areas, for example, abstract reasoning or situational judgment, are usually not taught in our curriculum, right? So yes, a student can they have a website, UCAT, you just write UCAT, you'll find the official website. They have a lot of questions in their question bank. You can practice. And I would say, and in fact, Debbie and I had a very deep conversation about it. Depending on, you first take a diagnostic test, depending on your performance, I would say 3 to 4 months preparation is required, right? And it's better to start early because as a student, you have your other examinations in between as well. So you should be well prepared for such examination. And now UCAT has become more competitive with schools like Oxbridge, Imperial as part of UCAT. So, and international cutoffs are always higher than the local students, right? So yes, that's about UCAT. What about Ireland, Hriday? What do you say about the preparation?
Ireland, there's no entrance exam. It's entirely based on an interview.
Okay, that's wonderful.
And so you just send your CV and they do an interview and that's about it. And even like after graduating, like for UK, you don't need an entrance exam. Even for Ireland, you're already licensed.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Great, great. What about you, Nish?
I think from what I remember I finished my boards in March, and I think the entrance exam was either end of April or beginning of May. They usually give you like a topic list, and it was quite similar to what I studied in 12th standard CBSE, because I did CBSE. And I generally don't think that I had to do that much of preparation. I would say like a month. But again, this was 6 years ago, so I hope it's the same now. But that's what I had to do. Yeah.
Is the situation same in Czech Republic for Charles and Messer at Debbie? You're on mute, Debbie. Debbie, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So for Charles, and I found out for a few other entrances also, maybe Nish can also put in there her contribution there. The biology was a little different, I felt, even then and even now. Human biology part is the only part that you need to top up more than what you have done in CBSE and ICSE, both. Anything else, your knowledge is just fine with what you have studied. If you just be on top of your game as far as your board is concerned. But the biology, all students till now that I have spoken, all European universities, they had to do more, because human biology part is there, which is very less in it's comparatively much lower standard. They maybe, especially in ICS, they do a lot of earthworms and frogs and this and that, but they don't care. They test you more on human biology, which is lacking. And so you need to study that separately. You can pick up any IB or IGCSE standard 12th book, and you're good to go.
Right.
If you're doing IB or IGCSE, you don't need to study anything separately for the entrance.
Wonderful.
Yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to add one thing here in terms of timeline, that when do you need to start preparation? So for UK, definitely you need to start early, let's say in the beginning of grade 12, or maybe towards even the end of grade 11, because UCAT exams happens in the month of October every year. Between July and September every year. You can pick up a slot and then you submit your scores when your application is due in the month of October every year. But when it comes to exams for the countries like Czech Republic or Hungary, examinations are post your class 12th exams, and you get time to prepare as well. So you're sorted for those exams, but UCAT is something you need to look after before. Right? Great. Wonderful. I think it was power-packed information, a lot of information we have received from so many people. If any of you who are attending it have any questions, please write to us and we'll pass on these questions to all these students, or if we can answer them, we'll answer it for you. Thank you so much, all of you who have attended it, Hriday, Nish, Debbie, Jhallak, Namya, and even Prerna, who is not here. She had to leave early. Thank you so much for coming here and attending it and sharing all this.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Okay, our next session is about law, and I have Kritika again here, who will be heading the law part. Over to you, Kritika.
Okay. Hi again, everyone. Okay, so for those who have just joined, I'm Misra. I lead a lot of our law applications for the students that come to I Know Me. Today we have with us 4 law students joining. The first one is Siddharth Soneja from King's University, London. Then we have Sadhika Gupta, who is a law student at Durham University. Then we have Anushree, who has done her undergraduate from the National Law School in Calcutta and has done her master's from Switzerland. And we have Srinjoy, who's done his master's in law at Durham and is now teaching at Jindal University, right? Okay, so let me quickly start with Anushree first, because I believe she needs to leave. So hi, everyone. Hi, Anushree. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for that introduction, and sorry for, any inconvenience.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah.
So if you could quickly dive into maybe telling us a little bit about your law school experience and your application experience, anything you think that's vital to share with our students, yeah?
Sure. So to start with, I'll just give a quick background on the undergraduate process, with the caveat that it's been 10 years since I've gone through that application process. So I'm not sure how relevant the advice for that would still stand today. I think the other speakers might address that. Though from what I hear, I think it's pretty much the same. You still have an entrance exam. It's still based on your rank. And a general advice to anyone who plans to pursue their undergraduate degree in India is just to prep well in advance, to pace it out, and to take as many.
Your voice is breaking, Anushree. We're not able to hear you clearly.
Especially in terms of taking mock tests. I think for any sort of, so even if you're sitting for an LSAT, say for a Jindal University, or you're taking the common law entrance exam, I think the key and the best way to hack these exams is to just, really double down on the number of practice tests you take. That aside, I would also suggest that, some people may not want to do their undergraduate degree from India, but, a quick caveat that in case you do plan to do your undergrad in law outside of India, say in the UK, the process for practicing law in India is not as straightforward. There is a possibility, say in the UK, if you do your undergrad there is an equivalence exam and a bit of a process that you can go through to become eligible to practice in India. But it's not that straightforward. And if your end goal is to be practicing law in India, I would suggest that the best way forward would then be to do your undergrad in India itself. So that's just a bit of general advice for the undergrad students. And as far as the master's program in law is concerned, I would say that the application process is quite different. Similar in a sense to how you would be applying for your undergrad to a university outside, in the sense that you would still have to go through the checklist of getting recommendations, getting your statement of purpose in order. But apart from those technicalities, I think an advice that often gets left behind is, with what intent you are planning to do your master's with. What do you want as an end goal from this? Is it purely an academic exercise? Do you want to stay in academia? And I believe there's a professor from Jindal here who would definitely be able to shed more light on that route. Or if in my case, you plan to practice law. So again, just a quick, introduction to what I do, a little late. But I have been practicing litigation in India for the last 6 years now. I do not work with a law firm. My intention has always been to work with the courts and to eventually establish my own practice. So in my case, the reason that I went to Geneva and applied to Geneva is because the program there specialized in international arbitration, a field which I eventually want to set up my practice in. So, Geneva was and is a hub for international arbitration in this sense. And that was the intent with which I tailored my application process. So, again, a general piece of advice is, you'll hear a lot about how do you go about your SOP, what you do about your letter of recommendations. And of course, I'd be happy to get into that in more detail. But as a preliminary thought, it is essential for you to have that clear focus. Otherwise, you will not be able to leverage this degree in any way, and it would just be, piece of like a rubber stamp. Again, especially if your intent is to practice as a lawyer in India, because a master's degree, quite frankly speaking, does not add much in and of itself. It's not a prerequisite to practicing law in India. And some would even say that, there are some drawbacks in terms of taking away from your professional experience time. So to really think long and hard if this is something that is going to boost your professional life or your academic life in a focused and directed manner. So these are just some preliminary thoughts I have on how students should think before getting into the application process.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anushree, for that. I also wanted to ask you that as a general advice for students, a lot of the students that come to us are very afraid of getting into litigation as a field. And most of them sort of opt for corporate law. So any advice you would have to give that does want to?
So I'll be very frank.
Yeah.
It's litigation is not pretty. It's not pretty and it does not pay well. And these are harsh realities. These are issues that, lawyers, litigating lawyers, we do grieve about a fair bit, and fair enough, because, the industry practices in terms of the salaries that a litigating lawyer would receive are, are appalling, to say the least. They're slightly better in Delhi, say, compared to some of, other tier two cities, and frankly, even like, say, a Bombay, for that matter. And that is a real concern. So privilege plays a huge role. I think if you have a support system and you're willing to, like, make cuts in your life, it's all right, but you have to then, of course, be committed. The second issue with litigation, again, very frankly, is the fact that it like, many other fields, there's a lot of, additional privilege that people might get coming from legal backgrounds, and that might throw you off. But I would say that this is, however, a concern that I think, can be downplayed. I've seen, at least, again, I'm speaking from a Delhi litigation perspective mostly. I can't speak for all jurisdictions, but there is a good and healthy environment. I see a lot of people, honestly practicing, not coming from legal backgrounds, who are doing really well. So if that is an apprehension that you have about litigation, I would say it's definitely not it's a hurdle. I wouldn't say it isn't, but it's not one that can't be overcome. So generally speaking, these are the two major roadblocks. As a practical piece of advice, if this is something you're interested in, but you genuinely have constraints, I have seen many people start off on the corporate path, perhaps doing disputes at a law firm. And then, after having, a decent amount of savings, say 3-4 years into their corporate career, making that switch to litigation. So, that's also a possibility. You don't have to, immediately be ready to take that jump right after law school. And it makes sense, because we don't really know exactly what litigation entails until you're actually in the thick of it. So, of course, internships give you some insight, and it is important, essential to do those. But it's also good to keep an open mind about it as you, get into it.
I'll ask one last question and then you can.
Sure.
And then I'll address
Sure.
it, right? Okay. So how has your perspective on the field of law changed since you started law school, considering you've done it abroad and what do you think about the whole field?
That's a great question. And I think, the short answer is it's changed immensely. I think, that it's a shock that you experience. And I think it's a very relatable experience for everyone who has made that shift. Primarily because, with all institutions, it's a structured environment. It's an academic environment. And you think about the law, but you don't really get to see it in practice and in action. And that switch is almost instant the minute you do start working. So there are a few points. One is about your perception of law itself. There are times that it can feel very gratifying. Say, an example from my personal life is, 3 months into my first job, I had an opportunity to argue a bail matter. And it was a successful argument, and the person got bailed, and their family members were there, and you saw just the relief in their eyes. They're like, okay, we've got our son back, we've got our father back. It's a very emotional experience, and that is a very it's an experience that you can only truly understand once you're in the thick of it, and that's super gratifying. So of course, to see it in action, your perception does change about the power that you hold as a lawyer. However, at the same time, there are also there are experiences that can leave you feeling a little disillusioned. times, when you just see how, unpleasant the court processes themselves can be. All the things that you hear about the inefficiency of the judiciary, the, incredible lag of cases and mountain of cases that aren't going away, and you see why that exists, and you feel frustrated because I think there's also very little that you can do as a lawyer, and you're just put into this process. So there are moments that can feel great, there are moments that can feel difficult, but overall I would say that my perception would be that you really need to be in it to understand if you love the profession, which is why it's okay if after 2 years of working and seeing just like, how your work-life balance, etc. plays out, if it's not meant for you, it's okay, is something I would say, because, you wear that chip on your shoulder otherwise.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people actually transition after studying the 5 years, working for a couple of years, and then they transition somewhere else. Okay. Anything else you would like to address that I haven't before you go?
My general piece of advice would really be this. I think I'd just like to double down on the fact that you keep an open mind. I think as someone who's young, whether you're still at university or in your early stages of your career, be open to learning new things. Be whether that is within law or outside of law. I think that you have the luxury and the flexibility of really truly exploring law in these early years. So whether it's litigation, whether it's through internships, policy, be open and get as much experience as you can, because that will only make you more informed, when you reach the second stage of your career.
Thanks so much for joining.
Of course, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. All right. So I'll jump to the undergrad, Siddharth and Sadhika. So tell us about your experiences. Siddharth, we'll start with you. Tell us about your experience at King's, admissions process, anything else we should know.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Just by way of introduction, I'm Siddharth. Did my 3 years at King's College London and graduated in 2023. So that's last year. I think that the admission process was a fun one. We did it with I Know Me itself. And I think one thing that became very clear is really you need to have some sort of game plan going into this. You need to kind of just recognize which universities you want to apply to. So with the UK, I think one of the things that requires a bit of strategy kind of planning is the fact that you are allowed to apply to only 5 universities. So if you really, really want to go to the UK, like that's the place that you want to study, you need to kind of plan out which are your kind of 2 target universities, 2 sort of, the ones that are attainable and one which is, one of your safe choices. I think we did that. And in terms of the admission process itself, I think the LNAT is one of the important things that we had to go through as part of the admission tests. It's something that you can prepare for. I personally didn't actually prepare much for the LNAT because I was at the same time preparing for the CLAT in India, the Common Law Aptitude Test at the time, and the LSAT India as well. So if I personally thought that if you're doing a decent level of the CLAT and LSAT work, especially in India, you should be all right for the LNAT. Sorry, it's not that much of a step up from what you do in CLAT and LSAT India. And yeah, 3 years at King's was amazing. I think my first year was online. But the one thing that you do realize very quickly is that there is a lot of emphasis on career planning after your 3 years. So not just in terms of getting a job, but also in kind of helping you understand if you want to do a master's, what use it is, and also a lot of extracurricular opportunities as well. So I was part of a lot of mooting at King's. I did a lot of different competitions, both in UK and internationally. So yeah, I think that kind of sums up my 3 years at King's. I think I'm happy to delve into any specific questions after this.
Sure. So I'll quickly also speak to Sam. I'll ask you, come back to you. Yeah.
Sure.
Hi, Sadhika. Okay, so will you tell us a little bit about your experience at Durham and the admissions process and any advice you have on students that are applying to the UK for law?
Hi, I'm Sadhika. So I've just graduated from Durham this July. And I think my admissions process was very similar to what you just heard before. Like we had the LNAT, and at the same time, I was also preparing for the CLAT. But one piece of advice I would give is if you've decided to come to the UK, then kind of sort out if you still want to prepare for the CLAT or not, because I assume you're also going to be preparing for your board exams or final exams at the same time. So I think I had this space in between that I was really flustered because I was thinking of UCAS applications. I was thinking of prepping for the LNAT, prepping for the CLAT, and also studying for my board exams. So I kind of let go of the CLAT once I decided CLAT prep, once I decided that I actually am dedicated to pursuing law at the UK. And what I did was that might be helpful to study with along while you study for your boards. There's a lot of online courses available. There are a lot of study centers in Delhi and as well that I know of that you can go join. But I would say that there is no need for that again, because it's very, once you get the hang of it, you get the hang of it. It's no mugging up, it's not knowing any of the law or whatever. So you can join online courses that are relatively cheaper. And the course I joined online, there was no teaching happening, but rather you put in the date for the exam you had, and they'd set you a customized plan for how many essays you need to write a day and how many of their sample tests you need to do for a day, which really helped me because I didn't have to make a plan for my preparation. There was already a plan in front of me. So that's what I used to prepare for the LNAT. And UCAS, again, you have to decide the 5 universities, and you have to decide if you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you have to decide between one of them because you can't apply to both. And I think that's all what's important part, like the admissions process. And it's important to know, like, once you write your personal statement, they're not looking for a lot of legal experience. So if you don't have any, like, that's absolutely fine. And in terms of my time at Durham, I really enjoyed my time at Durham, but I think one thing that came as a really big surprise after studying at a CBSE school was the amount of self-study you're expected to do. So my average week would look like 1 or 2 lectures a day and maybe 3 tutorials in a week that lasted 1 hour. And the main teaching mode was lectures and tutorials. So lectures would be a full class size where there wasn't really an opportunity to ask questions in between the lectures. You could go after and ask, or you could go to a professor's office hours, and then there would be tutorials, which would be a dedicated maybe 5 student to 1 teacher ratio, where they would delve into a specific topic, and you're expected to study and come for that. And they're like, mark your attendance, and they're really helpful in understanding concepts because you basically solve practical questions in those. So there's a big emphasis on self-studying. So my day would look like, even if there's 1 lecture, I would spend the day on campus because the readings they give for lectures are quite a lot. And then you always have assignments or something or the other going on. And at the moment, like when you're studying for those, it feels quite doable because you don't really have that many graded assessments or exams. At Durham, the exams are only once at the end of the year. But I would say law is not something you could sit and mug up at the end of the year because most of the law exams are already open book. So it really requires a lot of application-based stuff where they want you to understand the law and apply it to the questions they'll give you. They'll not give you direct questions like, what's the law? Like, explain this or this. They'll give you situation and they would want you to apply the law and answer it. And same with the essay questions. They're not direct essay questions. So you can't, if like that's the teaching style you're expecting, I would say to research more into it because it requires you to constantly learn throughout the year, understand the law, keep going to tutorials. So at the end of the year, you can answer those questions because you can't just replicate the information. And all the universities have a lot of societies and stuff you can join. So even Durham had Solicitor Society, Barrister Society, Meeting Society. So there's a lot of opportunity to get involved. And one thing I found very useful in Durham is the college system. So you'll be automatically allocated to a college. And once you're in a college, you get free reign to establish any society. So one piece of advice I could recommend to you is if you're in a college, start your own law society, start your own, anything related to legal society, whether it's women in law or whatever. But basically, it would look really good on your resume and gives you a chance to lead something at a smaller scale, which is less daunting than doing something at the university level. And yeah, it just goes by quickly, but it's completely doable because it's not as scary as you'd expect it to be, because everyone's like, oh, law school, and like, oh my God. And one thing that I enjoyed the most in my third year, which I've just done, is I got a dissertation is compulsory to do in Durham Law School. So you don't have the option to do other modules instead of a dissertation. You have to do a 40-credit dissertation. But they give you a lot of free rein in that, as compared to what I've heard about my friends in other universities, where you can really choose any topic that interests you. So I did mine on medical law, which I really liked. So I'd say in Durham, there's a lot of scope for you to do things your own way, but which comes with its own con, that you also have to self-study a lot. So just keep in mind that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sadhika, for that. And since we're on Durham, Srinjoy, maybe you can also tell us about your experience at Durham a little bit.
Okay, thank you for having me. I think Sadhika has already, well, one small correction. I did the same exact course as Sadhika, and I graduated in 2011. So it started in 2008. I just want to emphasize repeat what Sadhika said. Self-study is extremely important. I can't not emphasize on that, because I think unlike India, where other teachers push you to teach, you are required to take your time and read, understand. And also something which as a student coming out from the Delhi university system and then going for an LLB out there, is something which Sadhika also mentioned. Don't mug up. If you're in the habit of mugging up, I in my first year, I don't know if this is still true or not, but your grades in your first year are not considered towards your final scores, because they assume that you're still learning in law school. So the first year was rather difficult for me, because I was still, my learning was still of that of an Indian student, where I'm mugging up. So I was fortunate enough to be in a system in Durham where my first year marks were not considered. It's only my second and third year marks were considered towards my final score. Any other specific questions you have for my experience in Durham?
And now that you are teaching at Durham,
no, yeah.
What do you think is something that students should know before entering a law program?
Really think hard if you want to, read and write a lot, and critical thinking and analyzing. And again, I re-emphasize, coming from an Indian system in CBSE and ICSE, mugging up is one way of doing well. You have to move away from that. You cannot replicate. Those skills are not
Indian system as well. If you're studying undergrad in India, the same.
Yes, absolutely. This is something which I see with students, at least in my in Jindal University, that a small batch of students, tend to want to replicate, even in open book exams. They choose to replicate information, which doesn't bode well for their critical thinking. I also see a lot of students who join a law school because it's a professional law school and it'll give them that safety net, and they often choose not to practice law. I've had students who have gone into business administration, who become musicians, or and have chosen not to do law. I'm actually happy for them, because they realize at an early age that they've chosen not to do law. But majority of students choose to practice law in various forms, be it through litigation. I think someone's already spoken about that and explained that really well, actually, the issues relating to litigation, and also chosen to do corporate law. I have personally practiced corporate law for 3 years at Misra and Luthra office. So it is very grueling if you're moving on to practicing law. Then being a corporate lawyer is very grueling. They will squeeze every ounce out of you, because they're also paying you a reasonable amount of money. So they will squeeze you for that. Any other specific questions?
I can come back to you with a couple of. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, Siddharth, I want to ask you that how difficult or easy was it after your course?
Yeah, so I mean, in the UK, there are two routes that you can take, as in going into practicing law, right? So one is that you can go down the barrister route. So barristers are essentially those who are actually in court, who are advocating a case. Or you could go into the solicitor's route, And solicitors are those who basically sit at law firms, do the background on cases, and also any transactional deals. That's what they handle. So those are the two routes primarily that you do. I personally picked the solicitor route. It is also the most common route for people to take. You see around 70% of graduating class usually go into the solicitor route. I won't lie, it is a very, very difficult process in the UK right now to get a training contract. So there is a stat around all of this, but if I'm not mistaken, there are around 3,800 graduating law students from, I think, the Russell Group universities, and about 300 jobs in top law firms, in the top 30, top 40 law firms. So it is a very difficult process. But I think the way to be ahead of it, and this is something that I wish I knew going into university, is that you have to be on it from day one. I think I came into it from a perspective that, it's something that you accept, that, you will get this, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a job. It's not that simple. I think it's very important to do two things. One, start applying early. So the way to progress through the job ladder, at least, the one that I think King's really is very supportive with, is that you need to apply. The process is you do a first year scheme at, say, any law firm. The next year you do a vacation scheme, and hopefully are able to convert that into a training contract. So a training contract is essentially the 2 years that you do.
Sorry to interrupt, but you mean, so first you do an internship?
It's not really an internship. So the first year schemes at law firms, at least, they aren't really internships. They're 2 or 3 days where you kind of, it's almost an inside program into most of these places. So they kind of give you a bit of background into what corporate law is, what are the things that you need to take away from it. So I think that's how you do it. So first year you do the inside scheme. Second year you kind of use whatever you've learned from the inside scheme to put it into your vacation scheme applications. So the vacation scheme is an internship. It's usually 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the firm you get it at. And they kind of, that's where you kind of impress them with, whatever you've learned at university, whatever skills. And usually at the end of the vacation scheme, you are interviewed for a training contract position. And that is essentially your gateway into the solicitor route. So you need to practice for 2 years as a trainee lawyer before you are qualified in the UK. And that's the process. So for me personally, I think I did get to know about the first year schemes a little later, but I did still apply, had one first year scheme. People often do multiple. And then second year, I did a different internship, not a legal one. But in my third year, I had 2 vacation schemes, which the first one I did, I just accepted the training contract from there. So it is a difficult process, but it's just about, I think, going into it early and starting early, not waiting for the second year when you're looking for internships. And I think the other thing that's really, really important is keep your grades up. I think this is something that right now is important to kind of remember, because the way the UK grading system is that you have third classes after a pass, a lower second class, an upper second class, and a first class degree. So almost all law firms have a upper second class requirement. So you need to score above 60% in your exams. But the thing is that around 60, at least at King's, there was a 60% of the graduating class that had a 2-1. So you aren't really going to be standing out with a 60 kind of score. It's better to push your score around a 65, 66%. That really helps you kind of stand out, at least in one way. And I think that's something to just keep in mind. Yeah.
Is it very hard to do that? I mean, do you need to put in hours to be able to achieve that sort of score?
So I think there is a very big jump between getting a upper second, that is a 2-1 degree, and a first class degree. I think I personally had a 2-1 in my first 2 years because I was doing a lot of extracurriculars, and it wasn't the hardest thing to do. It was just, you put in, you need to still be very organized for it. You need to be able to kind of just take in all the material you have and consolidate it in some form. Because again, as I think everyone's mentioned, rote learning is not the way in over here, and I think in law school in general, because you're not asked what is the law. You're really asked apply it in this situation, or more at times difficult. It's argue against a legal position that exists in the world, right? And that's a bit difficult. But I think it is still easy to get a 2-1. But I think the jump to a first class degree, yeah, I think that does require a lot of hours. I think you really need to, I think in some way, have a bit of rote learning as well, in the sense that you need to remember case laws very well for this. And it's not really about rote learning, it's more about just knowing which case has what principle and really applying all of them together in your written work. So I think that is something I found very, very difficult at the end of my third year.
Yeah.
But it is doable. I won't lie. It's not that this is something that's, a very rare situation.
You have to balance everything.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it becomes more difficult as well because you're applying to a lot of law firms in your second and third year. So, I mean, I personally did around 15, but I think I know people who have applied to around 35, 40 at King's. So, I mean, on average, that would be the average number that you're applying to. So balancing law firm applications, if you're into extracurriculars, balancing that, as I think Sadhika mentioned, your societies, if you're a part of any at King's, it's the same kind of system. You can open up your own societies anytime you want. I think those are things that you need to really keep in mind and just figure out a way to balance it. And also kind of just start doing well from first year, because at King's, your first year also does count. It counts for, I think, 5% of your grade. And if you do well, I think there's a system where you can make it count for 10% of your grade, but no one really does. So I think that's kind of something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Thanks, Siddharth. And what about you, Sadhika? What did you feel through the whole applying for jobs process? Did you find it very difficult? What light can you shed on that?
I'd say personally for law, do not completely relax in your first year, even if it's not included in your degree, because each and every law firm will ask you for your first year marks. So even though it won't count towards your last classification, every law firm is looking at your first year marks. And correct about the going above the 60 thing, it is very important to have marks above 60, because you go to law firms' websites, some have outright said that we won't be considering applications from people below 60 marks unless you have reasonable circumstances or anything to explain the marks. So that's very doable. Again, if you just keep learning throughout the year rather than leaving it for the end of the year. Personally, for me, if someone's interested in extracurriculars, I'm one who's been really involved in extracurriculars. I was kind of intimidated by the law mooting societies and barrister societies, because that's why I'm going through the solicitor's route, because I'm more into technical corporate work rather than being into public speaking or advocacy or anything like that. But I used to play football in school, and I pursued that through uni, where I represented Durham across the UK in Pucks championships against other universities. And to me, that felt completely doable because I had a routine. So managing that with studies and obviously you need to have your priorities set. When I say you can get into extracurriculars, I don't mean leave everything because the lectures are optional or whatever, just get into that. But it's more about if you can find the balance, because a lot of the law firms, which I find is very, very nice from my process in applying for internships as compared to India, do look at and value extracurriculars. So when the application process works in a way where they first ask for your previous experiences, and then they have some firm related questions about why this firm, or what skills do you think I needed to be a solicitor, or even more practical questions. But they do value any experiences. So when you apply to a law firm, they do not expect you to come with a lot of legal work experiences. But a lot of UK students, for instance, are working part-time jobs to support themselves. And they really value that as well, because they feel like skills can be learned from anything. So if you don't want to spend all your time into law societies, that's completely fine. You can just make sure whatever you're doing, you're learning something from it, and it works towards an end goal. So whatever it is. Like one thing that I put on my CV that I was told by a law employer, like a firm employer, that they really valued. I was on the exec for my football team, which involved a lot of dealing with sponsors and, sponsor our team and organize kits for the players and everything, which essentially I molded into my application. And I said that it basically worked as a small business where my players were the clients and I had to, like understand their needs and convince people for sponsorship and stuff. So it taught me commercial awareness, which is really important for like law firm applications. So basically, you can do a lot of stuff, especially when you go outside. There are so many opportunities for you to be involved. And if you're learning something out of it, your applications will also, if you're genuinely learning something out of it, you can tell that from your applications. And law firms would also value a lot from that.
And have you managed to get a job or are you applying?
I am in the process of applying to training contracts.
Okay, so you are still.
And another thing that's really useful right now is because the government's not changed the rule, but once you come to the UK, you will have a 2-year graduate visa you can shift to once you graduate, and which will give you time just to find a job apart from studying. And it won't have any visa restrictions on how much you can work per term time or anything like that.
Right. Okay. And Sadhika, if you could also in the chat write for us the preparation program that you did for your LNAT for our other students to know prep program they can sort of look at. Yeah.
I will do. I'll just look it up now. I just did it 4 years ago, so I'm a bit unsure which one I did.
No worries. So if you remember, that's fine. Okay. So Srinjoy, anything else that you think our aspiring law students should know about India or Durham?
Yes, I think someone mentioned this previously, but if you're choosing to study in the UK, be mindful of which universities you're applying to, because the Bar Council of India only recognizes certain limited universities. So you can't apply to any and all law schools in England, and you can't even apply to law schools in Scotland, by the way. You can only apply to schools in the law from England and Wales, which have been accepted by the Bar Council of India. Once you complete your degree in England, you have to come to India and then do a conversion test, which used to be very affordable at my times. I believe from hearsay that it's become very expensive because they've realized that these students are going abroad and they can definitely pay a higher fee for the exam. So I think be mindful of these things before you choose to take a decision, because if you're certain about practicing in India, and if you're a second generation lawyer, I think the first speaker spoke about this.
Yeah.
If you already have family in working in litigation or in some law firm, you have this awesome practice, then studying abroad doesn't really make sense. You'll be better off just going to CLC1, that's Campus Law Center, or any other 5-year degree, or any other 3-year degree program for that matter. So keep that in mind with your end goal. I understand it's too much to ask from young people at the age of 18, 19, 20, but I wish someone had informed me that, hey, what's your end game out here? So keep that in mind when you choose to apply.
To really think through what is it you want.
Perhaps that's a question for parents. In our culture, the parents actually drive this a lot, right? Does your child really want to study? Does that person have the aptitude to sit for hours and hours and take in information, analyze it, critically analyze it, just not analyze it, and then what's the end game to you? Yeah, sorry.
And I'll be very honest. A lot of students come to us and they say, because I've watched Suits, I want to become a lawyer.
Yeah. So there are two kinds of students which I have seen when I teach first years. Some students choose to join law school because their family already has encouraged them, or rather, I would say that's very polite. They push them to join law schools, and they have an existing practice, and they have that advantage once they get out of law school. But for a first generation lawyer, they really need to think, hey, do I want to put myself into this, be it England or in India as well?
Right. Thanks so much, Srinjoy. Siddharth, there's this on the group, I'm not sure if it's relevant. It says, hey, is there any resource where we can read through successful VAC/TC applications?
Yeah, so I think there is one very good resource that I personally used. It is a bit expensive. It costs about £60 a month, but at least when I was using it, it's called TCLA, the Corporate Law Academy.
Maybe you can.
Yeah, I'll just drop it into the chat. I think that's one way of doing it. The other way is just ask. So I think one more thing that I realized is a very good tool through the 3 years is LinkedIn. I think leverage your LinkedIn a lot. The fact is that you will find a lot of people, especially in law. I think a lot of people actually post about, where they are working, where they've got a training contract. It's very common, right? Just reach out to them. If they're from the same university as you, reach out to them, and they are often willing to share their applications that they had submitted and what they had done. I think that's how I did it. It was quite useful for me. The other thing that I think I just wanted to add about the process is that try in any way possible, right? So in my second year, for example, I didn't get an internship. So I didn't have the vacation scheme in my second year. I actually did in my third year and was lucky enough to convert it for the next year itself. So I started my job the next year itself. But I think one thing to keep in mind is try doing anything in that second year's summer, right? Even if you haven't got a legal internship, that's fine. Try getting some finance experience, or try getting some, any sort of experience that allows you to kind of have transferable skills into the job. So yeah, that's something I think is very important.
Right. Thanks so much for joining us, Siddharth, and taking this time. I'm sure it's early morning for you, but thanks a lot.
No worries at all. Thank you so much for having me.
Sadhika, any last few words before we've already run 5 minutes over, but any last few words you'd like to leave our students with?
I think just know what you want to get into. And even if you don't, there's a lot of people to ask. Again, leverage LinkedIn, ask your seniors. There's always people to ask. So don't stress about it too much.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Thank you for taking the time out. If anybody has any questions, I will let you guys know personally if they want anything else answered. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody for joining us today. Thanks, Kritika.
Thank you. Thank you.